I'm a bit confused by its contents. Most of the people that I asked in the room, who, in my opinion, should have known what the policy contains, are also rather confused over whether, for example, a pill of Advil possessed by a student falls under this policy or not. The policy seems to refer to illegal drugs, prescription, narcotics, alcohol, and all the bad stuff. And then the third paragraph says students may only be in possession of medication, as detailed in Board Policy JLCD. Medication seems to include non-prescription, over-the-counter, harmless pills. I looked at JLCD, which is not in the packet. It's a separate document you have to retrieve on the SAU building. By the way, if we have policies that are referred in other policies, it might be a good practice to have them in the handout, since it makes it hard for people in here to review them. But be that as may, that policy seems to talk strictly about prescription policy that has to be administered by the nurse, and you have to have approval from the parents, and we all understand the needs for that. My question is, A, whether this is meant to cover over-the-counter medication. Again, I'm talking about my daughter having an Advil for those days when she needs one. When it would be rather difficult for her to spend 10 or 15 minutes to get to the nurse. Yeah, maybe she doesn't want the entire school to know that she needs an Advil that day. Maybe she doesn't want to get suspended for having an Advil. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's covered or not. I'd much appreciate a clarification. And if the policy is meant to actually cover non-prescription medication, I'd want an explanation as to why, in God's name, we need that. And I'm sure there will be solid reasons if the policy says so. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll examine that when we get to that agenda item. All right. So we'll move this now to opening remarks, and then we've got all kinds of donations to actually examine and some status reports.
Sure. Thank you. Few opening remarks, and I know that the students have a couple of news as well, a couple of pieces of news from the high school. We have received the newest NASDAQ numbers from the enrollment projections. I've forwarded those to the board, and these are looking out for the upcoming 10 years and the projections for the different grade levels as well as grade configurations. Confirm the trend that we have talked about. What I would propose or would suggest that particularly concerned about the middle school, I would like to organize a meeting with police, fire, building inspector, and hopefully a representative from the school board and the administration to just look at the number of kids that are planned to be at the middle school, and just look at any facilities concerns that might come up so that we can address them before the next school year, and have basically just all the pieces in hand that we need to address. So if a board member would volunteer for that meeting, I would very much appreciate that. I will be in touch with the chair and maybe or any other volunteers if you just shoot me an email. The NEASC accreditation visit has kicked off on Sunday afternoon, a wonderful welcoming and kickoff event at the high school. All the school board members were there, members from the community were there, staff was completely assembled, students were there, and it was an impressive presentation in the auditorium. I think the NEASC team was impressed, to say the least, and they have started their important work Monday and will go on until Wednesday with numerous meetings, visitations of classrooms, conversations. They had opportunity to work with administration as well as individual school board members, and prepare their report that's expected by the end of the school year. Then we have on Friday and Saturday the theater production. You can't take it with you at the high school. Looking forward to that. Wanted to report that parent-teacher conferences were held the end of October for grades kindergarten through 3. The feedback has been very positive about the earlier date rather than waiting until close to November and the Thanksgiving break. Parents appreciated it. Teachers felt they had good meetings with the parents, and in both schools they had multiple sessions to accommodate all the parents and the parking and the traffic. The parent-teacher conferences for grades 4 through 8 will be held right before Thanksgiving break and will be announced accordingly. Do you guys have something for the high school?
Yeah, so the longest list is sports. We every fall sport team qualified for a further event than the regular season. Cross country ran in meet of champions, both boys and girls teams. Field hockey, boys soccer and girls soccer unfortunately lost in the playoffs, but volleyball is playing tonight and they moved on to the Final Four. Other than that, upcoming events include Mr. WHS and class video night. And the new NHS members were inducted last Wednesday.
Thank you.
Alright. So that is everything with the opening remarks. Why don't we move now? We have an update from Eagle Scout candidate, so Ken Cole, and then we also have on the agenda another, but I think he may be getting here a little bit later.
That's what I'm understanding. Yes. He's working, I think.
Some pictures to hand down. So, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Ken Cole. I'm a sophomore at Windham High School, and I'm a Life Scout for Troop 266. And you asked me here for an update on what's my project. So, since I came here September, I think it was, and proposed my project, what I'm doing for my project is a challenge course in the woods behind the center school. 4 stations will be used during the PE classes for team building, teamwork activities with the students. What I've done since I proposed it is did fundraising, it was a car wash, very successful. Will Carpenter came and helped me out with that. I purchased the materials, constructed and installed the first 3 stations. Ran into a little complications with the 4th one with the big rock ledge underneath the ground, where in some of the holes it was up to like 3 inches below the surface. And the legs I was trying to do like 2 feet down into the ground. So we believe we have a good solution for that. We're going to drill a hole underneath the rocks and then use metal brackets to attach the posts. The next things that we're going to do is build the last station, install it hopefully this weekend, and then I have wood chips being delivered this weekend. I'll spray around, and then after that all I have to do is signage. I should be done. So, an Eagle Scout project, it's supposed to be leadership. So far I've worked with about 20 different people for a total of 120 man hours. So this is by no means an easy project. But I made a lot of good progress. I'm about done, so it should be good.
Yep. All right.
Excellent.
Well, this looks center out. You can see just a couple of the images there. And I'm particularly intrigued by this one here.
Mm-hmm.
So is the challenge, so this is a team building, right?
Yes.
You have to hold hands as you, how do you work this as a team,
So you're gonna have, it's done in pairs.
right?
So you're gonna have 2 people start standing on the side where the walking beams are close together. They're gonna stand, their hands up in the air like this, putting weight on each other's arms, and then walk further down the post, getting further apart and see how far they can get.
See, I'm curious because the school board is going to be running this, so I'm trying to visualize it in terms of the pairs. Maybe the chairman will cheer, I'll stand on the side.
Mr. Chair, I was gonna suggest that we draft somebody else, maybe from the administration, to be that 6th person, so just looking down at the other table.
We want a
Well,
tall
I don't
one.
hear a second, so. This is great, and it sounds like, you know, you're getting, if you didn't already know it, a great crash course in Windham soil and New Hampshire granite. sounds like you're being resourceful and trying to figure out a way around it, so. Look forward to seeing this when it's all done.
No reason to do any borings out there. I think we already know the information.
Anything else?
Nice job. Thank you very
Good
much.
job.
Thank you very much.
So, from there, it's a good news Tuesday here, we now have multiple donations. We'll start off with the, Exelon Generation, is there a representative here? No? Alright, then, Mr. Steele, Mr. Renner, does one of you wanna?
Do you want to go through? So we have multiple donations from a variety of companies and individuals. The Excellent Generation has made a donation to the cheerleading at the high school in the amount of $700. The donation is to be used to help fund team events and supplies. Do we accept them individually, I would say?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we didn't have anybody for this one, correct? Okay. So Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the donation from Exelon Generation to the high school cheerleading team in the amount of $700 to help fund team events and supplies with gratitude.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Breton, any discussion? All those in favor? 4-0.
And then we have next a generous donation of $3,500 from the Friends of Windham Hockey. That is paying for the 2014 and 2015 locker room rental at the Ice Center. Is anybody, I don't believe anybody is here for that.
Also, that's incredibly generous donations, maybe we could get a motion to accept that with gratitude.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the donation of $3,500 from the Friends of Windham Hockey for the 2014-2015 season locker room rental at the Ice Center, again with our gratitude.
Second.
And second by Mr. Breton. All those in favor? 4-0.
Look how much the ice costs, if the
I
locker
know.
room's $3,500.
And getting the times to be on there. Next, we have donations for a Chris Herron speaking event at the Windham High School, and this is actually funded and supported by a number of people. Would you like to come forward?
Good evening. We as local businesses are collaborating together with the high school to bring Chris Herron's message to our community. I'd like to start off by introducing the following businesses. For those who don't know me, my name is Jessica O'Neill. I'm the owner of the local State Farm Insurance Agency. This is Shannon DePietro. She's the realtor and partner of Coco Early and Associates. Others that couldn't be here this evening is Susan McInnes. She's the owner of Windham Pilates and Wellness Center. Colleen Mitchell, local rep for Merrimack Mortgage. Monique Donovan, who is the owner of Donovan Law Office. And Robin Young, president owner of North Star Financial Planning. For those who don't know who Chris is, he's a former NBA basketball player. He played for the Boston Celtics. Chris himself struggled with drug and alcohol, which ultimately cost him his professional basketball career. Chris will share his story with the students, and he will share statistics about drug and alcohol use amongst teenagers across the country. I never want my children, who are students here in our community, or others here in our community, to be faced with challenges that Chris was faced with. As business owners, we decided to fund this event as a gift to our students here in the community. If we can change one person's decision to stay away from drugs and alcohol, then we have made a difference. If we can make a change for one kid, one family, then it's worth every dollar of our donation. The event's gonna take place on November the 17th at 1 o'clock at the Windham High School. We invite all those here on the board to attend. You boys down there will be in the audience. It'll be held in the gym where Chris, that's home to him. And I think it's gonna be a great event. So we hope that you accept our donation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, why don't we accept these en masse, but thank each and
Yep.
name each of the businesses. And keep in mind the total here is for over $3,600.
Yeah, I think I added it right.
So,
Mr. Chair.
$1.
and $1, yes it is.
So I will try to do this correctly. So I would like to make a motion to accept the generous donations from Windham Pilates and Wellness Center, Merrimack Mortgage, Donovan Law Office, Coco Hurley Associates, North Star Financial Planning, and State Farm Insurance for a total amount of $3,601 to fund the Chris Heron speaking event at Windham High School with gratitude.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, any discussion?
I just wanna say thank you very much. That is a really, really nice gift, something that will truly benefit our students. I'm very grateful.
Great, thanks. I do have testimonials of, he speaking at other high schools that I'll leave for you guys to read. I think it's gonna be a powerful, message to the children, and a dear friend of mine, was in the audience at her high school when it was presented to her student at that school, and, you could hear a pin drop.
That type of message will carry more weight coming from someone else than coming from parents. So I have a son in the 9th grade, and I hope that he has an opportunity to be part of that event.
Just one other note from me. I'd also like to mention that the group of businesses that I just mentioned here are constantly stepping up to the plate. This is, a very familiar list of, folks that I see on high school band programs, I see on last night, I see on literally dozens and dozens and dozens of events. And, so in addition to this specific one, I'd just like to note that they're always there for us, and we appreciate it.
I just wanna echo that, and not even just with the district or the school, the Strawberry Festival, Harvest Festival, always out there. And the other thing is just, we discussed at the end of the summer, we participated in a drug and alcohol survey. And, in a community like Windham, to think that we don't have, some students who have some problems or who might be considering, I think a message like this is so powerful, and it can't be underestimated, so thank you. All right, so we've got a motion and a second with gratitude. All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, just because I keep rattling off 4-0, Mr. Senevoli did text me earlier. He had a personal concern and a conflict, and he will be here a little bit later tonight. So I think from there, we're ready for the preschool presentation.
Good evening, I'm Renee Bennett, I am the preschool administrator. And I'm Heather Pacheco, the preschool teacher. And we're just gonna briefly give you an overview of the early childhood program we have in Windham. To really understand our preschool program, you have to understand the 4 major tenets that were guiding our philosophy. Integration, we really believe in the early childhood program that we're integrating all students, meeting them where they're at within an inclusive classroom setting. In order to do this, we have a team approach. We have special educators, early childhood educators, related service providers, the IAs. Everyone's working together to meet the needs of all the students in a classroom setting. We're following a scientifically based academic curriculum. We did purchase fund shine. We also supplement the handwriting without tears, and you bring in a lot of other instructional techniques. And we're following Wyndham's philosophy of integrating curriculum and technology, knowing that these students are going into the elementary schools. So we have a smart board, they have access to iPads, there's a center that would incorporate laptop. So I'm just gonna take you quickly through a day. You are gonna come to our preschool program. You're gonna arrive and sign in, and what does this look like for the students? They're taking care of their personal belongings, putting them in a cubby. Right now, they're signing in by finding their picture. This will eventually transition into them finding their name and putting it in the mailbox for their teacher. Then they find a seat on the rug and they show their teacher that they're ready for circle time to start. Skills we're really targeting is independence, routine following, being accountable, following directions, take care of your own personal belongings. From circle time, you're gonna walk in and you'd see interactions between adults and peers and peers, opportunities for turn taking. There's a lot of adult modeling. We also do whole group instruction, so we're introducing the academics that we're targeting that week, the letter, the number, the shape, the color. Because it is 30 minutes, we do incorporate movement breaks. We're talking about an age group that can make sustained attention for 3 to 4 or 5 minutes. And what are the targeted skills? We do vocabulary. We actually are doing social emotional skills. We introduce feelings. What does it look like? Identifying your own feelings. How you could help a friend if they weren't feeling great about something. This is where Heather does her literacy and math instruction. Executive skills, communication skills, gross and fine motor skills. All of this is touched upon at Circle Time. This is a picture of Circle Time that is incorporating some literacy activities.
We have to keep
That
it
has to
open.
stay open.
Sorry.
Appreciate the input. It's good though,
And this is Circle Time where we had a guest speaker. We were doing a thematic unit on community helpers. So from Circle Time, they go to centers. Centers right now is 4 distinct different learning areas that are set up while they're at Circle Time. It's differentiated instruction, heterogeneously grouped students at each group, and it's 10 minutes in between transitions, and they sort of follow their routine on which center they're transitioning to. So pretty similar to what they're gonna see when they enter your elementary schools. Targeted skills. We do integrated art with fine motor, and it's usually led by an OT. Same for speech and language. We'll run a communication or language comprehension center. Sometimes it's expressive language, sometimes it's comprehension. Academics is led by a teacher or an instructional assistant. And then we have self-directed, which is for the students, run by the students, and they're working on critical thinking skills or problem-solving activities. So they're doing patterns. This is a math center where they're working on making patterns. A literacy center. It is quite amazing to see the academics that these preschoolers are actually doing. They are matching, they have to pick through the tray and find a picture that begins with B and glue it on their B sheet. So it's really quite exciting. Independent and explorational free play. There's a lot of research that supports unstructured time for children in school so that they can develop these problem-solving, critical thinking skills, and that was something we were really cognizant of when we were developing the early intervention program. So it may look like free play, but the instructors in the room are really careful about every 2 to 3 weeks they're changing the materials so that the toys or the dress-up play or anything is novice, so they have to redevelop the function of this toy or how do I do this dress-up. So it's not the same toys every time. Usually goes with the theme. Adults supervise, but they don't guide the play. And there's great thing about it, there's no limit to which students can do what. So if all the students wanted to do dress up, we would let all the students do dress up, and they would have to figure out how to share the toys or how to take turns or what that would look like. Of course, skills we're looking at, imaginary play, conflict resolution, communication, natural opportunities for problem solving and sharing. So this is just an example of a self-directed free play. Another example. We talked about recess or sensory breaks, we went back and forth, but again, believing that free play, opportunities for peer interactions is very important to developing the critical thinking skills that they need later on in life. Heather does have a recess time. It looks different. Sometimes it's outside on a field, so students have to entertain themselves on a big open field behind the high school. Sometimes it's on the preschool playground, and sometimes the sensory breaks are on the rug. And I have a quick video. I won't show the whole thing of a sensory break on the rug for the little kiddos. Again, skills that we're targeting is direction following, gross motor. I think self-help. When we get into the winter, the kids needing to dress themselves to go outside. We're going to target that. Reinforcing some social engagement with the peers, and also understanding safety rules. When they go up to the field, they have to use a crosswalk and going outside and holding the door, shutting the fence, all life skills that are important. This is an example of cooperative play at the preschool playground. This will play for us. And there is direction following, and the students are giving other students directions on what they're going to do next.
Alright, let's turn. Control your body. Yep.
You can tell it was Halloween time. Okay, let me skip to the I just want to give a big thank you to the police department and the fire department that came and spent a morning with our preschool when we were done with our unit on community helpers. They brought an ambulance, a fire truck, a police car, and they let the children completely explore it. They got down at their level, they answered questions, they did a fantastic job. They did circle time with them, they were just really phenomenal. And this is my favorite picture. I'll leave it. Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Thank you very much.
We did bring you guys copies of,
We have a progress report that we had to develop. This is the first year Windham has done it. So this goes home to all the students that are identified, not identified. That will go home to them in November, and we'll start parent-teacher conferences in November. And then we'll hand those out for the first time. So those won't go home until we have the parent-teacher conferences. We'll introduce it at the conference, and it goes along with the curriculum.
And leads right into that kindergarten curriculum too, which is nice to get, we've had kids in the community for so long, only in the community, so it's been hard to really guide them into the curriculum for the kindergarten, and it's nice to be able to work, especially with Renee being at both buildings, to make that more cohesive for the kids. Kindergarten.
If I could just add, I visited occasionally, and it's just a phenomenal place. What we have done, what you guys have done in such a short amount of time, it's truly amazing. And I think the feedback we get from parents, it's really speaking to that as well. And if you don't mind, coincidentally, not planned, not staged, this morning at 10:19, I got a letter from, a quick email from one of the parents who wanted to take just a few minutes to let us know how happy we are with the Windham preschool. Do you mind if I spend 20 seconds to just read this? My 3-year-old daughter has been enrolled since the beginning of the 2014 school year, and I can't tell you how happy my husband and I and our daughter is with everyone and the program itself. To be honest, we were hesitant about enrolling her, thinking we would wait until she was 4, but when we attended Info Night and saw how wonderful the staff was, we started to change our minds. Also realizing that she was so eager to go to school, she absolutely loves it, asking every morning if she has school today, even asking on weekends. That is a true compliment coming from her, showing that she truly loves her teachers and the program and her friends too. So much so that we added another day to her school day to make it 4 days a week. Also, the individual attention to the students from the teachers and additional staff is priceless. We feel truly lucky to have this amazing preschool in our own town, and we're looking forward to more amazing months ahead, sincerely. So it was just, I wrote back to her and told her that this is on the agenda tonight, and she was very pleased about that. And I think that's, unsolicited feedback like that, to hear that from parents, really makes my day. And I think it makes your days when you hear that. And to start something in the first year, to have that feedback and that success is truly a wonderful experience. And I thank you all.
Thank you. Moving into policies.
Yes. So we have met in the policy committee and are ready to present 3 policies that have, again, been on the docket for quite a while for your consideration for first reading. The process is tedious, the process is slow, but we're trying to make progress. These policies have to do with drug and alcohol use by students, which is policy JICH, tobacco use, product ban, and possession in school and other facilities pertaining to students under JICG, and then the corresponding adult or employee tobacco products ban and use and possession in school under GBED. The most significant change probably is under JICH. When doing research on the policy that is currently on the books, and then looking at the proposed policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association, the committee felt that there is a much more concise language with proper referencing in the proposed policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association. So the committee's recommendation to the board is to essentially replace the existing policy with the model policy JICH with all the references, and there's a couple of references in here that were referenced earlier, JLCD, the possession of medication, and then the search policy, JIH. I have copies here if people are interested or if you want those as references. I'll pass these down. The policy committee has not reviewed those two policies at this point. They are included here as reference. Hand those down. In part because other health-related policies are on the docket for review in the near future. So this JLCD certainly will be one that we have to review together with other recommendations from the nurses. So included here, not so much for discussion, but for reference. I don't know what, if there are any questions about the JICH policy at this point.
I have a question. The other two policies we're looking at tonight, there seems to be, there's one, is drug and alcohol use by students, and then I
Yeah.
think the other one is drug and alcohol, I'm sorry, students' tobacco products ban, use and possession, in school facilities and grounds, and then there's a complimentary one for employees.
Yeah.
Is there a complimentary policy on drug and alcohol use? We've got one for students, do we have one for employees?
For the staff?
Yeah.
I can't answer that offhand, I don't remember.
Personnel?
Yeah, looking personnel.
It would be on the G section, it's not referenced here.
I didn't have time to look for that.
I would imagine there is some reference, but I would have to go back and look at the the manual.
Or GBEC, drug-free workplace policy, which is under the employee section.
What is that, Mike?
GBEC,
GBEC,
that is one of the ones that is listed up top.
and the next one is GBED, which is the corresponding tobacco for the employees.
All right, which we have here. So why don't we, so,
Do you want me to just go
That
to
is-
the other two as well and point out the changes, or do you want to do them one by one?
let's do them one by one.
Okay.
So, Ken, so to your question, so it's GBED, did you have other questions about this policy, just trying to, about the student one, the JICH?
Yeah, I agree with the comments that were brought up by the resident about being more specific about the type of medications over the counter. I think that needs to be spelled out. I also had a question I didn't understand. There's a comment in here. that addresses what the ramifications are for students. It says any student who is found by the administration to be in violation of this policy shall be referred for prosecution and subject to disciplinary action up to and including suspension, expulsion, and other discipline in accordance with the district's disciplinary policy. Goes on to say a few more things. The next paragraph says students with disabilities who violate this policy will be disciplined in accordance with the student's IEP program. I was just curious why there would be two different policies for violation of this particular.
Yeah, the discipline policy is the same. The discipline, the consequences are the same. However, for students with individual education programs, there are additional protections there. For instance, if it were a manifestation of their disability, that has to be established. In terms of length of suspension, that triggers those other inquiries. And the IEP is typically providing for additional information about those students, whether or not they have the understanding of what they do. Those are some of the questions that would come up in the manifestation determination. So that's it's an additional layer of protection for special education students. However, the regular policy applies for all students.
You're good, okay. I just wanted to come back to, again, the comment that the resident brought up, just thinking about the drug and alcohol use. I actually don't see anywhere in here where it bans over the counter.
In this one?
In JICH. And in JLCD, it doesn't explicitly either, and in fact, even indicates that there are several types of prescriptions which the child can have on him or her person.
Inhalers and.
Right,
Yeah.
inhalers, EpiPens, provided that there's documentation from the parent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could certainly, and it seems like that would be in JLCD, we could approach JLCD explicitly to make sure that something over the counter with,
Yeah.
again, checking with the insurance provider, checking with the nurses, to get input.
Yeah. On JLCD, on the second page, under 6, you see there is an italicized section that says, all medication, over-the-counter and prescribed, must be in the original pharmacy label container and accompanied by a signed parent's request for giving medication or treatment in school. So this could probably be clarified.
I think it does need to, especially because original pharmacy label
Yeah.
container, that language right there is just something different to me than what you can
Than
buy at the gas
Advil,
station.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll pay attention to that when that other group of health-related policies was going to be reviewed.
Right. But maybe we also jump this up, since there's reference to what we're talking about right now to JLCD. And again, I have no problem, I agree with what the resident said, provided that we're not missing something in terms of the nursing staff or something along those lines, and also within reason. I think there's a difference between a second grader having a full bottle of Tylenol that he or she can open and an 8th grader,
Yep.
even a 7th grader. Again, something that's commonsensical, but if we can get into all that before we get to the second reading, and then we can modify.
I agree with the chairman. If we're gonna pass one, we gotta pass them both at the same time, because they need to be in sync.
Okay.
Any other questions on JICH? So with that in mind, we don't need a formal motion, obviously, because it's a reading, but I think we do need clarification on JLCD from the nursing staff, and again, from the, and I might be jumping the gun here in terms of the insurance provider, but I'm just trying to make sure we've got all the bases covered in
Yep.
thinking about this. But again, I think common sense, all things being equal, should prevail. And let's have JLCD up next time we approach JICH, so we can tackle the two.
Well, the only other comment I have, but
Mhm, yeah, please.
it says here, all medication over the counter prescribed must be in the original pharmacy labeled container. I'm just thinking if a parent bought a bottle with, 1,000 Motrin in it, they're not gonna wanna send that to school with their kid, so it's something we probably need to address somehow.
No, I agree. I think that's something that struck me as well. In terms of GLCD, we want to make sure again.
Right.
that
We'll
this makes
typically go
sense.
about it, look at the model policy, and then talk to our nurses, and look at best practice, and then vary this accordingly. And if we need any kind of further review, legal review, et cetera, we'll do that as well. And that's what the committee really tries to accomplish, and it's just a mountain to climb right now.
That being said, I do think that the proposed GICH is better than the other. It seems to me to be a decided, it's definitely better than what we had before, so. All right, so are we good moving on from GICH? All right.
Next policy is JICG. This is student tobacco products ban, use, and possession in and on school facilities and grounds. Minor changes, some additions to that. The original as we currently have it on the books, it is under the student section, but really tries to cover adults, employees, other persons, and students. So the committee decided to clean that up and just limit it to students, and then deal with the compendium in the adult section, on the G in the employee section. So change in the first line, instead of no person, no student shall use any tobacco products. In the second paragraph, there was some discussion, again, with adjusting it to current issues such as electronic cigarettes. That should be included specifically because that has been coming up and around in recent years. And then we tried to include something that would also allow for other tobacco paraphernalia as a collective term that we don't have to review the policy every year because something else comes on the market. We've had electronic cigarettes or the hookah sticks. They come by different names, and we can't possibly put them all in here. We tried to classify as best as possible. So the suggestion is to do tobacco paraphernalia to cover more of the things that might come up in the future. We have facilities definition, that's also the same. Towards the bottom, students as a new heading is no longer needed. And then the policy really ends at the top of page 2. The rest is stricken employees and other persons.
Comments?
Yep. So I just have one question around clarification. The policy that begins paragraph rather begins, is the responsibility of the building principals or designee to initially enforce this policy. So the final line says, after this request is made, if any student refuses to refrain from using tobacco products in violation of this policy, the principal or designee may call the local police, and here's where I'm confused, who shall then be responsible for all enforcement proceedings and applicable fines and penalties. So enforcement I get, but the fines and penalties, it makes it sound like the police are responsible for those. And wouldn't that be responsibility of the student, or if there were fines and penalties and so on, to pay fines, or the parents of said student? And maybe I'm not understanding it as it was written, but it just seems that if there's a fine, it seems like it's being attached to the police to pay it.
They're applicable.
No, right, right, right.
So the language is.
I mean, I know we're
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
wordsmithing here a little bit,
No, but that's.
but it might,
Essentially, I think what this if I read it right, once it's referred to the police, we are not in the business as school officials to try to collect fines.
Right.
That's left up, once it's reported to the police, it's in their house, so to speak.
Although what it also suggests though, and again, building off of that same statement, is the fact that there are no in-school penalties. Because once the student refuses, then the way it's phrased, then everything gets turned over to the local police department.
Yeah. That's right, that's how it reads.
I mean, is that what we want? That seems a bit much.
Mm-hmm.
And the line that I just talked about, it looks like it's repeated again in the final paragraph.
Yeah, there's one other comment I have that builds upon that. The word that's used is the principal or designee may call the local police. It leaves the responsibility of the building principal or designee to initially enforce the policy by requesting any person, any student who is violating policy to immediately cease the use of tobacco products. After this request is made, if any student refuses to refrain from using tobacco products in violation of this policy, the principal or designee may call the local police, who shall then be responsible for enforcement proceedings. I think that I like the ability that we have, we're putting the decision-making into the principal's hands, that it's not black and white, it's not a hard zero tolerance. Because I think we need to have common sense. But if there's no penalties, what do you do if you have a student that continually violates it? I'd like to see there be something, as the chairman I think was inferring, rather than just turning over to the police if it's a first-time offense or, a second time.
If you turn the page, would that address that question? The principal will develop regulations which cover disciplinary action to be taken for violations of this policy. These regulations will be communicated to students by means deemed appropriate by the principal, in addition to disciplinary action taken by a school. Criminal penalties may result from violation of the policy.
Right, when I read that, if I may, Mr. Chairman. When I read that, I felt that this is something that I think the board should be involved with, because I can sense that this could wind up being something that could be, considered a very serious infraction. And if we've got a principal in one building who develops regulations that are different from the principal in another building, I just think we should be more involved with this, because I know there have been incidences in the past, and there's been disagreements between parents and the administration. And I don't know where to go with this. It's just my initial thoughts. And I'd welcome to hear you guys' thoughts as well.
I could build on that for a minute. Personally, I think the key to that is that there be some consistency
That's what I'm
in
trying
right,
to suggest.
in what it is. So it's nice to put the decision in the hands of the principal, but I think that it probably should be a little bit more where the principal is enforcing it. Enforcing a policy that exists at each school where this is applicable. I hope to God we don't have to talk about this at the Golden Brook or the Center School, that could happen. But, the principals, I think, need to be aligned in terms of this is the policy, this is the, these are the ramifications of a first-time offense and subsequent offenses, so that there's no gray area there for something like this, because as Mr. Harvey said, this could become, rather serious. And so I think that, the whole idea of having the punishment is to nip these things in the bud so that they don't happen. And if there's some ambiguity about, well, if I do it once, I might,
Yeah.
nothing will happen to me, or, at the high school it's more rigid, but at the middle school they're not gonna really enforce that and so on. I think that just opens up a whole lot of pain.
In general terms, I would maintain that our principals have a pretty clear idea what's developmentally proper, and in terms of the handbooks, what the disciplinary code is. One thing we could contemplate is have this policy be accompanied by a procedure that then we develop outside of policy that is more flexible in the application of this discipline procedure that is referenced on the second page. So we can certainly develop something that is accompanying this policy, and at the very least review what we have on the books in the handbooks and for the discipline code. But I would like to shy away from, again, like you mentioned, tying the principal's hand too tightly and having to follow a certain
I don't think that,
schematic that doesn't allow for individual.
I don't think that's what you were suggesting though.
I think probably what I would suggest is probably
Just looking
somewhere
for
in between.
consistency.
Mhm.
Yeah, get some consistency, and yeah, make it flexible, but, it needs to be, that same flexibility needs to be consistent.
I would imagine it exists in each of the schools, and I think our job would be to, and maybe in the policy committee, to look at what do we have on the books, and just review that, and make sure that it is consistent, at least for the individual school, and then also has maybe some gradation from school to school, given that kids get, have more higher, better judgment, hopefully, with increasing chronological age. Would that suffice to develop a procedure to review the discipline code, what we have on the books?
Well, I think that's good, but I guess what I'm thinking of, I'm looking here and it says in addition to disciplinary actions taken by the school, criminal penalties for fines and everything. So we're kind of spelling out that there could be fines. We're being specific about the stuff that the police department is gonna do, but we're not being specific about what the administration or the principals are going to do. And I think it would be helpful to have a little bit of the consequences in the policy. It's good to have an addendum or something, but I'd rather have it here so that there's no ambiguity about it. This is the policy, and this is what, these are some consequences that you may encounter if you break this policy. Because kids push the envelope, right? So they're always gonna try and see how far they can get before.
That's in part why we have this. Electronic cigarettes wasn't spelled out, and that was, in both schools, middle and high school, is where the push is happening. So that's why this policy came before the committee, and to clarify at least that it's covered.
But I'm sorry, but that's the instrument, right? That's what, that's what's causing them to break the policy. What I'm saying is, I want students to see this, not just in a handbook, but to see it, to hear about it, and to know that in the policy it says, A, you can't do it under any circumstances, no tobacco products, paraphernalia. I like how that's all spelled out, so that it leaves room for new products and so on. That's all good. But I would like to see something in here that gives them a little idea what the consequences are. Because it's one thing to know the policy, but it's another thing to know that if I break this policy, this is what's gonna happen, or could happen.
Yeah.
Good one from me. I'm actually comfortable with this administration at the school level making those types of decisions. I really don't feel like we need to be in the business of dictating how you deal with kids that smoke cigarettes at school or do what they're doing. And I also get concerned because, there's a big difference between an 18-year-old student lighting up a cigarette as they drive their car off your property, which is technically in violation of this policy, versus, a pack of sixth graders hiding in the woods and smoking cigarettes. I'm comfortable with allowing the principals to handle it.
Yeah, I think the tricky part, I was gonna use a different example, but the concern that I would have with Mr. O'Connor coming across a second grader who's got 3 cigarettes he somehow managed to steal from home, he doesn't even have a lighter, versus 3 cigarettes in a high school student's, whatever, I think there's a complete difference there. I'm not saying that the former is okay, but I think how you discipline the principal's gotta have some leeway there in terms of Mr. O'Connor not immediately going towards a, in-school suspension or something. So I think what I want, the problem I have is that, first of all, it sounds as though we're just kicking this to the police right off the bat. The principals are just, okay, you're not gonna put that away, okay, I'm calling the police, and that to me just seems like overkill. It just seems
I don't-
absolutely ridiculous
Yeah, I don't
for
think that's
something.
the typical, maybe that last paragraph could be inserted a little earlier,
I think
that there are
that
school consequences.
if the, if at the very least, if these at least reference the handbooks for the various schools, I think that's something that should be in place in terms of this is what the expectation can be, rather than it's just sort of gonna be dealer's choice, which is how it reads now. It's just whatever the principal kind of decides, and that's what's gonna happen. So at least if there's reference to the handbook, there's something documented, something the parents can go to. And then there's also something that, maybe we need to add the last sentence to the very end of this, that certainly, however we phrase it, that all appeals end at the board level. I mean, we could have something along those lines, that if a parent or a student has an issue with the principal's decision, they can then appeal to the superintendent, and if they have an issue with the superintendent, all decisions are final with the, with the school board. And to me, that would then accommodate the principals, because it's their domain to create these handbooks, but also the kids and their parents aren't just, and again, I think our principals do a good job, but in policy aren't subject to what could be seen as just, exactly, have it be arbitrary.
Right, and I agree with what you just said. You're gonna wanna have a different level of discipline depending on the age. It should be spelled out.
Yeah. So maybe we can have,
And it may well be spelled out.
I think we need to know that, though,
Yeah.
in terms of the handbooks, and I think
I think
probably this
between-
board's biggest concern is gonna be middle school and high
Mhm.
school. And I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I think that's what we're talking about here, first infraction, second infraction, third infraction. And in a handbook, to me, that's where that should be delineated, so that it's completely clear. But I would like to see that come to Mr. Jonas's point, from the principal. I think that's the principal's domain to determine what's developmentally appropriate. And then if, in going through there, some parents have some issues with it, they certainly may appeal all the way to the board, and then at which point in time, then we would take that on.
So between now and the next time we bring it up, we'll make sure that these are reviewed, references are made in the text,
To the handbooks.
and then see whether it satisfies the board here.
Yeah, and it's something Mr. Senabaldi indicated before, and I don't really have an issue with it, of adding a simple sentence to the end of, especially anything that has a punitive component to it, like this policy, just having in there a simple reference to the fact that really all of the
Say per whatever the policy
yeah, we've got
is.
the policy that covers that,
Just read it.
exactly,
Mhm.
yes. All appeals,
Yep.
and with the school board per policy, thank you, whichever that is. Are we good with that then? We'll come back to another reading.
I think so. Do we wanna review what would go in the handbook, or do we just wanna leave it as, trusting that the principals will come up with something that, is appropriate?
I don't think it hurts if we wanna look in the handbook, certainly those are public documents, but I think at the end of the day, personally, I don't wanna get into crafting that handbook level policy, but I think as a board, if we're gonna feel more comfortable in deferring to the handbook, it wouldn't hurt if people took a look at them.
Okay, can I do one quick comment? Just as a quick comment of where I'm coming from with just being careful with how much we put in the policy. I'll give you an example. One of my lovely children took some fireworks to school one day, unbeknownst to her parents, in, I think, the 5th or 6th grade. School finds them. If you read policy JICI, which is the board's policy, it says you shall not bring any explosives, blah, 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 to school. And it says if you violate this policy, it will result in both disciplinary action, which is really not that descriptive, and notification of the police. So technically, by board policy, the administrator should have called the police and told them that my daughter had 2 firecrackers in her backpack. So I just wanna be careful about how much we dictate, because there's a lot of, and I have to trust that the administration is gonna do their job and, appropriately deal with these issues.
I do too, that's why I like the word may and not shall, because may is discretion, shall is must.
Yeah, but for example, this one says they will
Right,
discipline and will notify fire.
right, and it's, so it's 0 tolerance.
We should probably tackle that.
Well, again, it's just, again, I know people are not gonna go to extremes here. I don't expect that she was gonna get handcuffed and taken to the police department, but I just wanna be careful what we put in the policy, because what we put in the policy is what we're specifically asking them to do, and there's really no black and white.
So, we have 2 weeks to think about it.
Right.
So we'll have a second reading.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. My only other quick thing, and then I think it sounds like we're ready to move to GBED. It's a mouthful. Just the use of the word paraphernalia, to me, that actually, when I read that, I thought of rolling papers and bongs. I
And it
never thought I
might.
would say in
Yeah.
a school board meeting, but
And-
that's what that means to me, as opposed to any tobacco-related item, which is what I think the intent is. So just something that we can maybe think about. We don't have to wordsmith it tonight. And maybe, you know, I can just see a situation arising, again, the same sort of scenario.
I think.
Because technically matches could be considered tobacco paraphernalia. Do we wanna go down that road? Obviously not.
I think with any and all of these policies, if your intent is to find the edges where it frays, you will be successful finding that. I think there's the spirit of the policy and the implementation of the policy, and that involves some level of common sense and trust. That, we're not trying to get around the policy, we're trying to cover most eventualities.
No, I agree, but I think what we saw, say, for example, with something like the dress code, where we delineated that,
Mhm.
we identified in painstaking
Absolutely.
detail, and then what ends up happening is it's impractical, or there are problems with it, so.
And it seems to swing back and forth. When it's vague, people feel it would be better to have it concrete. If you have it that, then the reverse happens. And to get to that middle ground is the real challenge there. But thank you for all that feedback. I think that's helpful for the committee. Thinking of the committee meeting, which happens on the 20th, we may not be ready for a second reading in 2 weeks.
I
We
think
may
we're
need to.
pretty full in 2 weeks anyway.
Yeah,
It's
so
just
it may
board.
go into our December meeting.
GBED, this seems to be more straightforward. We're not talking about personnel. Thoughts on, again, just the paraphernalia statement, but other thoughts?
The only question I would have is that if you amended the previous policy on tobacco ban for students, and we're gonna amend this policy to just reference employees, are we missing something for visitors?
I think on page 2, you have all other persons.
Okay, so even though this is under the employee section,
Yeah.
I'm just concerned that all other persons is,
Gets
means
lost.
employees, because we're under an employee section, I believe. Yeah, I had a
table
the G series is personnel.
So would it be K,
I don't
school,
know.
community, home relations?
I'm not sure.
Again, the other, just,
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a place for that little section here. That's probably why School Association decided to just wrap it in there.
Okay.
alright. Other than that, I'm good with GBED
Okay.
for now. Anyone else?
the same type of conversation we had with the students and last teachers, the employees.
In terms of being more
Just having some
prescriptive.
Yeah. You know, I don't know what that is yet.
Is there must be I'm sorry. Is there an employee handbook?
There are, and they require more work. So it's
It's the same sort of reference, I would presume, that
Yeah.
that's in there.
Yeah, I think, again, we 10 years, we're starting that process up now. Much has happened, and this is one of those reviews that we need to get to.
Okay. All right, so we'll come back to GBED. All right, so quarter one expense report. I think this is you, Mr. Steele.
It is, thank you. In the past, for expense reports, we've given the board the equivalent of page 28 through 50-something in the packet, which is just the quarterly expense report that comes from our system. I've taken it upon myself to try to provide a little bit more information to the board, including a projection for the board to give you a sense of where we stand as of the end of the first fiscal quarter, which goes from July 1st through September 30th. An overview of this report is made, but I cannot stress enough that we are through one quarter out of 4, and 2 of those months were summer months where there's no students or teachers. So this is early in the fiscal year to be making projections, but nonetheless, I think it's appropriate to give our best attempt at providing this information to both the board and the public. So far, the fiscal year is going extremely well. All of the retirees that were planning to retire at the end of this fiscal year have delayed that, which means those payouts are no longer needed for this year, even though they were budgeted. There's a flip side of that, as you'll find out in 2 weeks when I present my budget, and I've already referenced that those folks will be looking to retire at the end of next fiscal year, and that has an expense. Good for this fiscal year, bad for next fiscal year's budget. Teacher turnover savings have been very positive this summer. The LGC health insurance rebates that have come to us,
Sure, sorry. The money, though, that was slated for the teacher retirements, you've put that aside
Yes,
with the intent to not touch that, correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
The LGC health insurance rebates that have come to the board that you have accepted, we did anticipate one of those rebates, and so we budgeted for that as a negative number, knowing that we were going to get that. The other one we did not, so there will be some saving, there's some positive balance to the district there. Our special education out-of-district projections show us that we should not be touching the contingency thus far, but again, do not hold me to any of that, because tomorrow we could have significant changes to that. And then, of course, the lease payment for the Golden Brook Modular Building is no longer necessary since the board paid off that lease at the end of last fiscal year. And those funds were set aside by the board with a motion, so those have been
Freeze them.
correct. Building level budgets, so thus far are looking to have a couple $100,000 surplus there. And so all told, we are looking at about $1.5 million projected surplus for this fiscal year. Again, lots of things can change between now and then, and I want to take a minute to go through how we arrived at these projections. I broke down our budget into categories that kind of make sense, that cut across multiple lines. For example, teacher salaries, those are spread out throughout the 30-page budget, but I've consolidated all of those into one line to show the impact of those particular lines. And you see right there, there's $500,000 right there, both from turnover savings and the retiree delays to the district. A couple other things I'll highlight: the health and dental insurance rebates, showing we'll get about a $500,000 net from that. Thus far, that's not been accounted for yet. And a couple other big things in there. Sped tuition, so it's $263,000 at this point, which $200,000 of that is a contingency. That is not looking like it's needed at this point in time. I've set aside an additional $150,000 for potential heating costs for this winter in case it's an exceptionally cold winter for some reason. So I've tried to go through here and do the best I can to sort of project here's what here's where we're likely to end up by the end of the year. And I can kind of show you where we look to go. So some analysis. I already mentioned the teacher turnover savings. In addition to just salaries, there's also the impact on FICA, New Hampshire retirement, those other employer-paid benefits we no longer have to pay. Capital projects category was funded from the $419,000 that was carried forward from last year's LGC rebates, and we also have $294,500 that we set aside from our GMR savings from health insurance. You remember that we budget our health insurance rates based on the guaranteed maximum rates. We get our finalized rates, which can be no higher than the GMRs. This year they were lower, to the tune of about $294,000. We set that aside. The board had a discussion about that. And we set aside also $145,000 from this year's current maintenance budgets to allocate those funds. So those are funds that have been set aside in that capital projects category, which, if you'll notice on the page before, it's near the bottom. It started with zero budget. There was no budget for that at the beginning of the year, but all of those funds come from these kind of unanticipated things, or the money that we brought forward from last year. The $77,101 that was for the Golden Brook Modular Building that was set aside, I put that in a contingency account that's labeled contingency and is restricted, so it can't be, it's delineated, therefore you can see it as something that's been set aside, meaning the board has effectively done that, so that's there as well.
But even though you're calling it contingency, it's technically encumbered in the sense that it's really designated to go back to the taxpayers.
Correct, yeah, there's no encumbrance.
Right, I'm
but
meaning it's a virtual encumbrance though, in that
Yeah.
it's not a contingency in terms of a rainy day fund, it's more, at least based upon the motion that was held.
Absolutely, yeah, and I know only the board can override that motion. And if there's some catastrophic event, then I suppose those funds would still be available to the board, but there's nothing, we're not anticipating that happening. Let's see. Landscaping, I've set aside money for the spring. I have no idea what the fields will look like in the spring, but based on what was budgeted and what was approved, I set money aside for the things that we typically do in the spring. So that's been set aside. I have no further comments. I would, if there are questions, I'd like to go over them and do my best to answer them, but the biggest question for the board is, are you comfortable with this format? Is this kind of how we want to move forward? Because I tried to mix consolidating things into logical groupings of accounts to make it easy to kind of understand, still providing the 26 or so pages of detail that goes line by line, and then providing some analysis that also includes a projection to kind of say this is where we're headed. So those are my comments.
Board questions?
I'd like to get back to you on the format. I like, there's a lot of information here, but I spent a few hours going through it. And I had a couple of questions for you that I asked offline. The landscape budget that you provided, the quarterly expense reports. Is the budget column, is that the voter approved budget amounts, or are those adjusted budget amounts? I know there's an adjustments column where you're making further adjustments, but is the budget column what we actually saw in January in the budget hearing and then approved in March?
Close. That's one area that was different. When the board adopted a budget after the March meeting, that was one thing I notified the board, because if you remember, I budgeted to bring it in-house and to have it be an in-source operation. Now, the board, we didn't go through with that, we outsourced it, and so the account numbers changed in terms of the distribution. We no longer are paying for maintenance and repairs of lawn mowing equipment in-house.
Right.
So
Okay, so.
the dollar amount is
so other
correct.
than that,
Correct.
okay,
The dollar amount is correct, and I did notify the board of that when we adopted the budget, that would change.
right.
But the budget column is the appropriation approved by voters.
Okay. I have a few questions. Never mind. in the, let's see, I'm gonna go by, well, there's two, I was curious, the public packet on the website is different than the public packet that was sent to us. The pages don't line.
Really?
All the information is the same, but the, yeah,
Okay.
some of the pages are up front, I think it was the meeting minutes, and others it's at the end, so it just, you know, when people were calling me up and talking to me about this, we were out of sync on the pages, so. Right now, I'm looking at page 13 of 57, this is what was emailed to us. And it's also labeled page 1 on the bottom right. The extended ESY, what is that, extended? School year.
Yes.
For the salaries, 34,000 has been taken out of that. I started at 49,000. Can you explain why we don't need that much money?
Yes, so and Roz is here as well. So our extended school year program is what's run over the summer for students who have an IEP who require services over the summer. The salary accounts for that. It's our teachers that get hired to do extra work over the summer to run these programs. And the salary accounts that existed, there was one at the preschool level, one at the district level. Additionally, as we discovered this year, there are other expenses associated with ESY that are coming out of the regular special education accounts, the 1,200 accounts. And Roz, this summer, ran a more successful program in terms of bottom line budget. It required more expenses for salary, but less expenses in the other things where we're sending kids out other places. And so we've redone those budget accounts so that we can clearly make it more transparent about what we're doing. So we moved the 34,307.50. That amount was transferred out to the salary contingency account that I created at the very back of the budget that shows all of the balance for teacher salaries. So you see the last page, page 23 of the expense report, has a contingency teacher salaries that right now is $456,000 sitting in it. That's the teacher turnover savings, the retirement savings, that ESY savings. It was all moved there so that it doesn't show as a balance in the preschool account. I wanted to make it, I set these things aside so that the budgets are all working properly, but.
What page was that you referenced?
23.
Page 23 of the expense report, I'm not sure what, in my packet it's page 50, but I'm.
Yes, I'm on page 35. Okay, and what line?
100,999,900,112, 299.
Okay.
If you go through this budget, all the teacher salary accounts have been adjusted to either add or subtract money to them based on the teachers that are hired in these positions this year. And any surplus or deficit was all taken from that contingency account, so it's all set aside so we know exactly where we stand in terms of teacher salaries as a whole.
Okay. Got a couple more. So, repairs and maintenance on page 1, you have $0 in there. Was that intentional? Do you have? Which function? At the very bottom, the very last line, page 1 of the report. Is there any money that you might put aside for repairs and maintenance in the CNA, or?
That is for the preschool only, and since we no longer own the preschool building next to the SAU, we budgeted $0 for that, for repairs and maintenance this year. We still will have some expenses at the annex, but there was nothing budgeted for it, for this year.
Did spend some money there.
We did, yeah, so there will be a budget transfer to cover that.
Okay. On the page 2, in the teacher salaries, the budgeted amount was $2.4 million, and you took close to $400,000 out of that. I'm just curious why we didn't need that much money and where that money went.
Yeah, two things. When we budgeted for Golden Brook teacher salaries, we included the 4 third-grade teachers in that budget. This year, they are functionally a part of Windham Center School, so we're paying those teachers out of the center school teacher salary line. So you'll see a corresponding increase on page 5 where that, the Golden, or the center school teacher salary line has a positive adjustment to it. And that is in response to the 4 teachers being moved.
Page 5, I don't see it on page 5.
On page 5, the very first line, under where it says Golden Brook School, the next line down says teacher salaries.
Right,
There's a budget transfer of 61,000 into that account.
right.
Center School did exceptionally well with teacher turnover, and so they would have seen money transferred out because they did such a nice job with teacher turnover, but there's actually 4 more teachers now being paid for out of that account than what we had budgeted.
Okay, but, we transferred out almost 400,000, I only see 60,000.
Yeah, because the net of all the transfers with the turnover savings, if we hadn't transferred those 4 teachers, we would have transferred a lot more money out of center school, it would have been a transfer out. But because we had turnover savings, that was a transfer out, and the 4 teachers transferring in, the net of all that is 60,000 transferred in there.
Okay, I'm doing a little slow here.
That's okay,
If I take 400,000 from one area, that's gotta go someplace.
yes.
And then we're seeing 60,000 someplace else, so there's 340,000 sitting around somewhere.
Yes.
Where am I missing that?
Okay, and I'm sorry I'm not explaining it well. 400,000 was taken out of Golden Brook.
Right.
I'll pick a number for discussion's sake. Say 250,000 was transferred into center school for those 4 teachers. The balance of that 400,
But where does that go? Because that has to show up as an adjustment.
correct, yep.
So, okay, so where is that?
Hang with me, I'll get you there. So 400 gets transferred out of Golden Brook, 250 goes to center school, 150, say, goes to the contingency line for turnover savings.
Oh, hold on, slow down. Do that again, because I'm trying to follow along.
Yep.
Do it again.
400 gets out of Golden Brook.
Yeah.
For the sake of discussion, 250 goes into center school,
And you're gonna tell me where?
yes, in this teacher salary line.
Okay.
And then the balance from turnover savings, 150 of that 400,000, goes to that teacher salary contingency line to be set aside.
How much went to the teacher contingency?
I'm not using the real numbers here, but say 150,
Okay.
okay? So now center school's up $250,000. But they saved 190,000 for turnover savings on the rehiring process for
Okay.
teachers. So the net of that is 60,000 gets transferred into that account.
So where do I see net savings?
At the bottom line, it's in the contingency
Can I offer a
account at the
suggestion?
very bottom.
Because I know that this is something that's important, but I think rather than have us all sit through multiple iterations of the exercise, maybe Mr. Steele can specify exactly where
Yeah,
things
sure.
went in a
Yep.
spreadsheet form and bring that to the next meeting, and that's something that can be part of the public packet.
Yeah, I think
So
that'd
it's
be
all
good.
above board and transparent, but then we're not continuing to go through this.
I'd be glad to.
Is that, are you amenable to that, Mr.
Right
Ryder?
there, that's fine.
Great.
So I noticed some other transfers here, like in special ed budgets. There's 95,000 taken from one school. Was that moved to special ed in another?
On
Looking
page
at
four.
page 3, top line. 95,000 from 772.
Yeah, there are many fewer instructional assistants to the tune of $94,000 worth of instructional assistants at Golden Brook, less than what was budgeted. So those funds were transferred to the instructional assistant contingency line at the back of the budget to be set aside for that, to not be used, in other words, unless for some reason there's instructional assistants that need to be hired.
Okay, so here's one down in Golden Brook on page 4. Principal salaries, it shows 84,000 was budgeted, an adjustment of 99,755 for a total of 93,000. If I recall right, I think Mr. O'Connor is making about $85,000.
Yep.
Why do we have 93,000 in there?
Christy Michaud didn't leave on June 30th. She worked after July 1st, and so we had to pay her salary for some period of time and also her vacation payout after the July 1st, so into this fiscal year.
Okay, how much was she making a year?
Again, I'm gonna ask if we can just maybe itemize all of these, rather than expecting Mr. Steele to come up with exact numbers. He needs to at some point, don't get me wrong.
Alright, so you'll put this
And
together.
it needs to
and
go
then
in a
we can
public
talk about it,
packet.
And then we can talk about it next meeting?
And it needs to go in a public packet, but,
That'll be fine.
all right.
Okay, it's, yeah, because the way that I look at it is even though she was getting paid X amount of dollars, you know, Rory was not, Rory's salary is gonna be prorated as well, so there should be some kind of an offset there. And then you took out, for the assistant principal salaries, started at 72,250, but we took out 61,000, but we hired an assistant principal, so money has to go back in there, correct?
Yeah, so.
So we'll put that on the list too.
If you look at my projection though, I see that on page,
So Adam, we're gonna add that to the list too.
okay, great. Yeah, well, if you look on, in the packet, my packet, page 27, where it says category level projections, under administrator salaries, I say additional projected expenditures for $46,034, which is exactly the Golden Brook AP salary for the rest of the school year. So I did project that.
Just got a few more.
All right, are these,
Isn't the purpose of this agenda item to talk about this report?
it is to some extent, but it's also what's going on is we're getting walked through and we're going in circles about where things happen. And that in part is because you wanna understand and the people wanna understand, and I think that's important. But it's not going to happen is without a blackboard or other things. I think what's probably the best interest for everybody, again, in terms of true transparency, is to have it written down rather than talked aloud in a public document, and then we'll revisit it, and then we have all those transfers. And if there's something that doesn't jive or that people have questions about, then certainly, then that's a discussion. But I think otherwise what's happening is it's essentially a monologue that's taking place. And unfortunately, a lot of this are things that maybe Mr. Steele doesn't have exactly at his fingertips. And so rather than have the entire meeting be at this process, I think that there are ways to get you the information that you require and to have it be public.
Would it be helpful to have questions emailed to me and I can provide a memo that I can have the next?
I think if we enter the email into the correspondence, so making sure that also is a public
Oh, no, I
document.
mean, if the questions are
Yeah.
emailed to me,
I
can-
know, but
yeah.
that way it makes it
Oh, I see, yeah.
straightforward to anybody out in the public that
The
that's
questions were
exactly
asked.
what's being requested.
So are you telling me that I should not go through this and make my requests at this point in time?
Well, what I'm asking you to do seeing as you're the only one talking and have been so for almost 30 minutes, is to make your requests in such a way offline, you have them be public so that they can be answered, and then if you have questions about them, we can revisit those again in public as well.
I would say that this is one of the most important responsibilities we have as a board. We have a report in front of us, I have some questions. I don't mind waiting 2 weeks to get the answers, but I don't see a problem since this is our last agenda item. It's 8:30 at night, really early compared to where one would usually go. I don't have that many more questions, and I don't sense Mr. Steele getting frustrated or feeling that I'm putting him in an awkward position. But if you wish to direct me to not go through this and bring up my questions, so be it.
I'm not asking you to not ask your questions, I'm asking you to do it in a way that maybe expedites their answering, and also make sure that it's clear, so that anybody can look at it and see exactly what came from where. Especially since, as you yourself indicated, we're dealing with 2 or maybe even 3 different versions of the same sheet, so we're all trying to dance around to find different functions, and I don't find it, I don't think that it's working out. Adam's working off a different version than you are electronically than I am in person.
It's the same numbers.
Maybe-
It's just the different pages in the PDF. I'm referring to the same page numbers in his report. He knows exactly where I am.
Okay, but you and he are not the only ones here, and that's my point.
I think maybe as a compromise is that bringing forward in the public forum the questions and maybe give Adam the opportunity to
And that's what I'm
respond. I think that, respond in a format that then can be publicly discussed at the next meeting. I think that would be probably helpful rather than I mean, on your part, to try to answer that question in detail, and sometimes you can't do this because you have 3 places to go to.
So I think if you have a few more broad questions, I would just ask them, I guess.
I just think, my comment on that would be, I certainly want, want the questions asked and answered as well, but I think my first priority there is to make sure that it's all right, that we're all able to understand it. And, we're not all looking at the same thing at the same time, whereas if it's prepared in advance and brought to us, we can all be looking at the same exact sheet and see the answers clearly. And then if there are additional questions that are being asked, we're all looking at the same thing as those questions are being asked and answered. I just think that, right now, it's a little kludgy, as they say. We don't, feel that way, certainly don't subject the public to that as well. I think it can be fine-tuned and done correctly. Not that it was done incorrectly, but I mean, done in such a way, I guess, is what I mean, that it's pretty clear to everybody, and that's to everybody's benefit.
Right,
And that's
my
really
point.
what we want, right, is everybody to have a clear understanding.
So we're on,
How many more questions do you have?
I don't know.
Okay then. Well, I would think that what might be in the best interest of everyone is for you to email the remainder of the questions, especially since you don't know how many more you have.
You want me to count them up?
I would like to have this take place in the most expeditious way. And I think what I've actually suggested is actually even more transparent than what's happening here, where we're dancing around from function number to function number and have no idea where things are moving or going to.
I don't know how you can be more transparent than talking about it on camera so everybody can see it.
I think by creating a public document, that's pretty darn transparent.
I don't disagree with you, and I believe that what Mr. Steele put together would be very helpful and augmented what we're trying to do here. And then we can talk about it further at the next meeting.
Was there a way to streamline your questions?
I was doing that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the other concern that I have is, to be honest with you, if we were dealing with any other business administrator than the one we have sitting here at the table tonight, this would be a complete waste of our time. We have to make these sorts of requests for this level of detailed information in advance to the staff. To do it, again, I have no problem with doing it in public, I have no problem with making it a public document, but to, go through a list of 5, 10, 15, 20 questions, technical questions about where each and every dollar went back and forth in the budget, on the spot, at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I don't think that's fair to the staff. I really don't.
No, I agree that he needs time to come back, absolutely.
And honestly, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we table this item and move on to the next agenda item.
Second, any discussion on that?
No, I disagree.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, so we'll table it.
All those opposed?
All those opposed? Okay. 1. And I think certainly if you want to email the remainder of your questions, that's perfectly within your purview as a board member and as a taxpayer. All right. Moving into the consent agenda.
Could I just, while we have our next Eagle Scout here, James Jensen, he was delayed by going to his job, the first day of his job, he made it back in time, and I would ask him to come forward and just share a little bit about your Eagle Scout project and give the board an opportunity to ask questions if they have.
Okay, so my Eagle Scout project was to replace the Windham School District sign, the SU 95 sign on 11, because it was outdated and did not reflect appropriately our school district. It still said Windham Pelham School District, and we had separated into our own school district, and so sign obviously needs to be updated. And so I had heard that there was a proposal going forward for a new sign, and I thought, oh, that would be a cool Eagle Scout project, so I came here, and I proposed my Eagle Scout project, and eventually went forward with it. And Mr. Finnenberg was very helpful in coordinating with the school board on what they wanted and basically how things should be done. And a lot of the communication back and forth. So basically what I did is I had proposed that we use the original sign that was there. And so we did do that, but the sign ended up being damaged, so we had to replace the board on which the sign was. And I did some landscaping around it, fixed it up, made it look nice, came back for like a good month and a half, watering it every day. Well, actually I watered it every day for roughly 2 weeks, and then after that it was twice a week for a week, and then for the rest of that period it was once a week. So, yep, and so that's basically what I did. And if anybody has any questions about the, it was, the budget that I had allotted, I came in under budget. I forget what my budget was, but what I came in at was around $1,000. I can't remember the exact number, but that was, give or take $100, that's where it was. But if anybody has any questions, they can ask me about it if they'd like to.
First of all, I'd say thank you for doing it. Certainly came out great. And I'd certainly love to see him get involved in some facilities for us, because he can come in under budget. But, you're our kind of guy. So, in all seriousness, no, thank you very much for doing it.
I'd also like to thank the school board. They were a big help in, making me go forward, because they gave me the opportunity to get it done, so thank you guys too.
Nice job.
Yeah, nice job. So many people comment on it, and I love, when I drive down 111, I see that nice green sign. Well done.
Thank you very much, sir.
And, you may not always understand the politics that goes on, but I also want to thank you for helping us out of a sticky situation when we were talking about the sign back when we originally were going to have it removed and replaced. So it was a very welcome, timing-wise, to have that done as a service project for the Boy Scouts. So thank you very much.
I want to join in and just say it's been a pleasure working with you and see that project take shape. I love the color, green being my favorite color, quite coincidentally. It's something you go to work, you see it every day you go to work, and what better use for an Eagle Scout project to be visible, to represent your work and your contribution to the district. So thank you very much. It's been sitting there all year, and I meant to invite you earlier, but I'm glad that we connected finally. And my sincere thanks to you and your family and the friends that helped.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Good job. Really lucky in a number of Eagle Scout projects that we've had throughout the years, just really beautifying and enhancing our community. So it's been great.
You can just say, keep them coming.
That's right.
There's more to do.
Go from there to the adoption of the minutes. We'll start with the public session from October 21st. I have a few changes. See if anybody else does. All right.
The pages aren't numbered. So this is in the section discussion on motion, Mike Jonas to authorize the authorization to move forward with Center School 1302 project.
Do you have them written down by any chance? I don't know why that occurred, but.
Do I have what written down?
Did you write them down? No. Could you say it one more time then?
Well, I'm just pointing you to the area where it's at. And it's in the area where Mike Jones made a motion. Authorize the administration to move forward with the Center School 1302 project.
Second to the last page, top.
I got it.
So it's in that section.
Mm-hmm.
It says motion carries 4-1, Ken Iring opposed.
Mhm.
I made a comment after that I voted against it because I didn't have enough information.
Okay.
And the details of the project weren't specifically defined.
Okay.
And I have one more. last page. It says motion on the floor carries 4-1, 10 are opposed. I stated that I opposed it, that I believe that the new assistant principal will do a good job. I had no problem with her or her work history. I believe that she'll be a great asset to the community, but I could not in good conscience vote for the contract because there was no employee contribution to the health care, and I believe we have to start doing that. So as I did with Mr. O'Connor, I voted against approving her contract as well, because I believe we have to take into account the terms of the contract in addition to their qualifications. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have a couple on page 7. Motion made by Ken Eyring. It says motion made by Dennis Senabaldi. It's actually motion made by Ken Eyring, seconded by Dennis Senabaldi, to allow public to appeal, is technically what it is, the ruling of the chair to not allow public comments on this matter. And then the motion did, the rest is correct.
Okay.
Are we good? All right. Accept a motion to accept with revisions.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the Windham School Board public session meeting minutes from October 21st, 2014, as discussed in the meeting.
Second. All right. Really quickly, I want to add before we go forward, and then I'll make sure you want to keep your motion in second. The very last page, you had 2 lines as placeholders. Ms. Figueroa, the board returned to public session at 12:50 a.m. That's consistent with the non-public, and the motion to adjourn was at 12:51 a.m.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay, I didn't know if you had those in there. They were in the public packet. They were, those were blank, so.
Yeah, the non-public came after.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So, if there's not anything else, all those in favor, 4-0. And then moving from there to the non-public. Mr. Cool's back there. The board entered into non-public at 11:55. There was an update on personnel. No action was taken. We came out 5-0, and that's pretty much it. I don't have any revision.
So hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Windham School Board public session meeting minutes from October 21st, 2014.
Second. Not hearing any further discussion. All those in favor? 4-0. Move into vendor and payroll manifests. Until Mr. Eyring runs through those. Do you want to do the, do you want to call them off?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. Should I do them all at once?
It's up to you.
I'm good with all of them. Everybody good?
Actually, can you keep 1023 out? Do that one separately?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the voucher number 1025 in the amount of $266,690.99 for general fund and food service. I'd also like to add to that voucher number 14 in the amount of $709 from the general fund. Voucher number 1024 in the amount of $117.52, and voucher number 13 in the amount of, let's see, from the general fund in the amount of $35,512.39. Title I temporary money, nope, that's $0. Food service in the amount of $2,277.58, and Windham High School band lessons in the amount of $459.44, which is a total of $249.41.
One clarification before I second. The document 14 is $709.24, correct?
Yes.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye, 4-0.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve voucher number 1023 in the amount of $1,217,931.85 for, should I give a breakdown?
If you want to.
Breakdown is general fund of $1,176,276.63. Title I temporary, $2,064.74. IDEA temporary, $22,266.49. Food service, $17,245.18. Windham High School band lessons, $78.81.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 3-0-1, three card abstaining. All right, thank you. So from there, I signed the contract for the new assistant principal
Yep.
at Golden Brook School. Now, wasn't any correspondence. Any board member comments?
Just quickly, with the accreditation process at the high school, thank you very much to all the staff that's been working on that so hard. And I'm really excited that it kind of, for me, feels like we're at that kind of final step of putting the high school in service and dotting the i's and crossing the t's. So I want to say thank you to them for all their hard work.
And I'd like to echo that. In addition, I had really the pleasure, and Mr. Jonas was here as well last Friday, of being a Trebuchet Day at the high school. And just really what a phenomenal learning experience. Just, something that you hear a lot about, disruptive education these days, about finding different ways of getting the students involved and really accessing the curriculum in different ways. And this is a prime example of a way to just really make physics fun and engineering and have it come alive. And just really a great experience to be out there and to see, really the sheer variety of the different ways that all the different teams of the kids came up with for designing the trebuchets and counterweights and everything. It's just really impressive in how seriously they took it, and also how they comported themselves to have that sheer number of high school students out there, and everybody was focused on learning and on the event. Just, I could go on and on. The only other thing to mention is, for me, is this Friday I will be at the Village Bean at 9:30 to 10:30 for my weekly discussion. That being said, is there a non-public?
No, unless you have questions about my nomination for music teacher.
Are there questions?
I don't have any.
You don't have any?
I should also mention there was a parent letter, but that has been resolved for now.
Okay.
I will report back to the board if necessary.
All right. So that being said, the nomination, right, there it is. Yep.
So if there's no need for non-public, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the superintendent's nomination of Nicole
Archibald.
Windham Center School music teacher, for a salary of $37,254 annually.
Which represents Bachelor Step 1.
Bachelor step.
Second. Any discussion?
I've had an opportunity to know Nicole through the high school, and I'm very excited. Thank you.
She also helped us out at the middle school as a long-term sub last year for maternity leave, I believe, and has full confidence of the administration and the principal at the center school.
All right. Hearing positive things.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself with making a comment.
No, that's great. So you made a motion already.
Yep.
And we've got a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think we should stay for another.
Are you sure you wanna end before 9?
I think we should stay for another 7 minutes,
There
'cause
is-
we have,
There are people at home that aren't expecting us to be done yet, that have run up, to grab them.
what are we gonna do with the people that are just tuning in now?
Watch the video.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn, please.
All right, there's a motion, there's a second. All those in favor? Aye. Good night, Cable, and thank you.